When I was in the second grade, I was called into my brother's first grade classroom and watched as a teacher humiliated him in front of the class, and went home and told my parents that night that I wanted a chalkboard and eraser and chalk as my birthday present. My birthday was a few days away. And I set up a little schoolroom in our basement, not only to help my brother so he wouldn't be embarrassed in the classroom ever again, but to help all the kids who were being embarrassed. And it was like, I knew back then, I knew at 7 years old there was something wrong with the way we were doing things in school. And I became a teacher probably for the wrong reasons. I know I became a teacher to help those kids because I didn't ever want to see that happen to anyone again. And spent a lot of years hearing stories from all kinds of things like that, and totally transforming from the way I had learned to be a teacher to someone who believed that she could set up a different kind of classroom as a teacher, a different kind of school as an administrator within the system, until I finally realized I was beating my head against the wall. It was not possible, that the system needs complete and total transformation in order to meet, in my opinion, needs of children. And as I started speaking about that and being attracted to people who were talking about alternatives in education, people started telling me about various things. One of those was a model school that was starting. It was going to, the grant had on the front page a broken schoolhouse, like crumbling down. I said, oh, okay, I'll try that. I was about to leave education at that point. Got hired into the model of change there, and found out it wasn't really a model of change. But as part of that, we were speaking to a doctoral class at the University of South Florida, and they are the people who told me, you sound just like Dan Greenberg. And I said, who's Dan Greenberg? And at that point, I had heard nothing about Sudbury education. And to make a long story short, within a week of hearing that, I ordered everything Dan Greenberg had ever written, the entire Sudbury Valley kit, and another teacher and I organized a similar group as we have here to start a Sudbury school in Florida. That school is going strong, and we are hoping that 10 years from now we can say the Jersey Shore Free School is going equally strong. I see some familiar faces, and I see some people who I haven't seen before, so I'm quickly going to go over, for those who don't know what Sudbury education is, it is the cutting-edge model, in my opinion. It is the model of total transformation of what school is. It almost reminds me of the story, for those of you who are old enough to remember, in the 50s when we talked about watchmaking or clocks, the only thing we ever thought of were the Swiss, because Swiss were the watchmakers of the world. They were the clockmakers of the world. And when they were introduced to the concept of digital, they couldn't accept it because it wasn't what they knew. It hasn't been long since nobody in my daughter's generation even knows that the Swiss are connected to clocks. And the same is true, in my opinion, about education. We're being introduced to a model that is the model of the future. And yet, those of us who know school to be this traditional model won't be able to accept it because it's not what we know school to be. I think we'll be left behind. I think the children who take advantage, and the parents of the children who take advantage of Sudbury will be the people on the cutting edge of tomorrow. I want to talk about a couple of things that are so different in traditional education and Sudbury education. Sudbury is a completely free environment. But with freedom comes responsibility. So children who live in the Sudbury model become more responsible than children in the traditional model, because in the traditional model we set up manipulated situations that say they're going to teach children responsibility. That's very different than Sudbury, which provides a participatory democracy. Children live in a complete democracy every day at school. There is no person in charge. The rules made by the group are what's in charge. So everyone is responsible to those rules. It's not a contrived situation whereby we're trying to teach responsibility. Responsibility becomes part of how they live because they've been involved with setting up the rules and setting up how the school operates. So within that setting of total responsibility with total freedom for learning, all students may choose what they want to pursue every day. They learn in the way Aristotle told us as human beings, we're naturally curious. Anyone who has spent any time watching a young child, a toddler, learn every moment of every day, grow in confidence, grow in self-esteem, understands what Sudbury learning is about. That is the way students at a Sudbury school continue to learn through 12th grade, by following their own inner desire to explore, to research, to figure out, to converse. Vygotsky says that conversation is the pathway to higher thought, because in conversation, whether it's 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 16-year-olds, in the daily conversation, students' minds are challenged to think about different ways, different alternatives. And it happens very differently when it comes from the group of students as opposed to from the teacher. Teachers are above the group in the same way that parents are above their children, and we naturally influence them, whether we think we do or not, to pursue certain things that may please us, that may interest us, that we think they're going to do. When children are allowed to follow their own inner desires for learning, they follow what's coming from in here. I see it in my little 1.5-year-old grandson. He loves to figure out how something works, and sometimes he'll sit back and watch for a little while, and sometimes he'll dive right in and try to figure it out for himself and get a little bit frustrated and stay with it. But the feeling of competence that comes when he figures it out is exactly what happens to children and teenagers all the way through Sudbury education. I've seen it with so many kids at every age level. And that is, certainly what I hope for all kids, because as a psychotherapist, I know that when they develop that competence, they're developing self-esteem, they're healthy human beings, they're inner-directed, and they're achieving all that they can be, almost across the board. That happens with all students. So we thought we'd talk a little bit tonight about the Founders Group sort of put together a top 10 reasons for choosing Sudbury education.